But now we're ready to come on.
Going on to the Hard Knocks tonight, Olivia?
I suppose so. Are you?
Yes. Rather tedious parties, don't they?
Horribly tedious. I never know why I go. I never know why I go anywhere.
I come here to be educated.
Oh, I hate being educated.
So do I. It puts on almost on a level with the commercial classes, doesn't it? But dear Gertrude Chiltern is always telling me I should find some serious purpose in life. So I come here to try to find one.
I don't see anybody here tonight whom one could possibly call a serious purpose. The man who brought me into dinner talked to me about his wife the whole time.
How very trivial of him.
Terribly trivial. What did your man talk about?
About myself.
And were you interested?
Not in the slightest degree.
What martyrs we are, dear Margaret.
And how well it becomes us, Olivia.
Lord Caversham!
Good evening, Lady Chiltern. Has my good-for-nothing young son been here yet?
I don't think Lord Goring has arrived yet.
Why do you call Lord Goring good for nothing?
Oh, because he leads such an idle life.
But he rides in a row at 10 o'clock every morning, goes to the opera 3 times a week, changes his clothes 5 times a day, and dines out every night of the season. You don't call that leading an idle life, do you?
You are a very charming young lady.
You should come and visit us more often, Lord Caversham. You know we're always at home on Wednesdays, and you look so well with your staff.
I never go anywhere now. I'm sick of London society. Shouldn't mind being introduced to my own tailor. He always votes on the right side. But objects strongly to being sent down to dinner with my wife's milliner. No could stand Lady Caversham's bonnets.
Oh, I love London society. I think it's immensely improved. It's now composed entirely of brilliant idiots and wonderful lunatics. Just what society should be.
Which is Goring, a brilliant idiot or the other thing?
I'm obliged to place Lord Goring into a class quite by himself, though he is developing charmingly.
Into what?
I hope to let you know very soon.
Lady Markby, Mrs. Cheveley.
Good evening, dear Gertrude. How kind of you to let me bring my dear friend Mrs. Cheveley. 2 such charming women should know each other.
I believe Mrs. Cheveley and I have met before. I did not know she'd married a second time.
Ah, nowadays people marry as often as they can, do they not? It is most fashionable.
But have we really met before, Lady Chiltern? I can't remember where. I have been out of England for so long.
We were at school together, Mrs. Cheveley.
Indeed. I have forgotten all about my school days. I have a vague impression that they were detestable.
I'm not surprised.
Do you know, I'm quite looking forward to meeting your clever husband, Lady Chiltern. Since he has been here at the Foreign Office, he has been so much talked of in Vienna. They actually succeed in spelling his name right in the newspapers. That in itself is fame on the continent.
I hardly think there'll be much in common between you and my husband, Mrs. Cheveley.
Ah, chère madame. I have not seen you since Berlin.
Not since Berlin, Vicomte, 5 years ago.
And you look younger and more beautiful than ever. How do you manage it?
By making it a rule only to talk to perfectly charming people like yourself.
Ah, you flatter me. You butter me, as they say here.
Do they say that here? How dreadful of them.
They have a most wonderful language. It should be more widely known.
Good evening, Lady Markby. I hope you've brought Sir John with you.
Oh, I've brought a much more charming person than Sir John. Sir John's temper, since he's taken seriously to politics, has become quite unbearable. Really, now that the House of Commons is trying to become useful, it does a great deal of harm.
I hope not, Lady Markby. At any rate, we do our best to waste the public's time, don't we? Now, who is this charming person you've been kind enough to bring to us?
Her name is Mrs. Cheveley. One of the Dorsetshire Cheveleys, I suppose, but I really don't know. Families are so mixed nowadays. Indeed, as a rule, everyone turns out to be somebody else.
Mrs. Cheveley. I seem to recognise the name.
She has just arrived from Vienna.
Oh, yes. I think I know whom you mean.
Oh, she goes everywhere and has such pleasant scandals about all her friends. I really must go to Vienna next winter. I hope there's a good chef at the embassy.
If not, the ambassador shall certainly have to be recalled. Pray point out Mrs. Cheveley to me. I should like to see her.
Let me introduce you. My dear, Sir Robert Chiltern is dying to know you.
Everybody is dying to know the brilliant Mrs. Cheveley. Our attachés in Vienna write to us of nothing else.
Thank you, Sir Robert. An acquaintance that begins with a compliment is sure to develop into a real friendship. It starts in the right manner. And I find I know Lady Chiltern already.
Really?
Yes, she has just reminded me that we were at school together. I remember it perfectly now. She always got the Good Conduct Prize. I have a distinct recollection of Lady Chiltern always getting the Good Conduct Prize.
And what prizes did you get, Mrs. Cheveley?
My prizes came a little later on in life. I don't think any of them were for good conduct. I forget.
I'm sure they were for something charming.
I don't know that women are always rewarded for being charming. I think they are usually punished for it. Certainly more women grow old nowadays through the faithfulness of their admirers than through anything else. At least that is the only way I can account for the terribly haggard look of most of your pretty women in London.
What an appalling philosophy that sounds. To attempt to classify you, Mrs. Cheveley, would be an impertinence. But may I know, at heart, are you an optimist or a pessimist? They seem to be the only two fashionable religions left to us nowadays.
Well, I'm neither. Optimism begins in a broad grin, and pessimism ends with blue spectacles. Besides, they are both of them merely poses.
You prefer to be natural?
Sometimes, but it is such a very difficult pose to keep up.
What would our modern psychological novelists, of whom we hear so much, say to such a theory as that?
Ah, the strength of women comes from the fact that psychology cannot explain us. Men can be analysed, women merely adored.
Do you think that science cannot grapple with the problem of women?
Science can never grapple with the irrational. That is why it has no future before it in this world.
And women represent the irrational?
Well-dressed women do.
I fear I could hardly agree with you there. But please, sit down. And tell me what makes you leave your brilliant Vienna for our gloomy London? Or perhaps the question is indiscreet.
Questions are never indiscreet. Answers sometimes are.
At any rate, may I know if it is for politics or pleasure?
Well, politics are my only pleasure. You see, nowadays it is not fashionable to flirt till one is 40, or to be romantic till one is 45. So we poor women who are under 30, or say we are, have nothing open to us but politics or philanthropy. And philanthropy seems to me to have become simply the refuge of people who wish to annoy their fellow creatures. I prefer politics. I think they are more becoming.
A political life is a noble career.
Sometimes, and sometimes it is a clever game, Sir Robert, and sometimes it is a great nuisance.
Which do you find it?
A combination of all three.
Allow me.
Thanks.
But you have yet to tell me what makes you honour London so suddenly. Our season is almost over.
Oh, I don't care about the London season. It is too matrimonial. People are either hunting for husbands or hiding from them. I wanted to meet you. It is quite true. You know what a woman's curiosity is, almost as great as a man's. I wanted immensely to meet you, and to ask you to do something for me.
I hope it is not a little thing, Mrs. Cheveley. I do find that little things are so very difficult to do.
No, I don't think it is quite a little thing.
I'm so glad. Tell me what it is.
Later on. Now, may I walk through your beautiful house? I hear your pictures are charming. Poor Baron Arnheim, you remember the Baron, used to tell me you had some wonderful Corot's.
Did you know Baron Arnheim well?
Intimately. Did you?
At one time.
Wonderful man, wasn't he?
He was very remarkable in many ways.
I often think it's such a pity he never wrote his memoirs. They would have been most interesting.
Yes. He knew men and cities well, like the old Greek.
Without the dreadful disadvantage of having a Penelope waiting at home for him.
Lord Goring.
Good evening, Arthur. Mrs. Cheveley, allow me to introduce you to Lord Goring, the idlest man in London.
I have met Lord Goring before.
I did not think you'd remember me, Mrs. Cheveley.
My memory is under admirable control. And are you still a bachelor?
I believe so.
Oh, how very romantic!
Oh, I'm not romantic at all. I leave romance to my seniors, and I'm not old enough.
Lord Goring is the result of Boodle's Club, Mrs. Cheveley.
He reflects every credit on the institution.
May I ask you stay in London long?
Well, that depends partly on the weather, partly on the cooking, and partly on Sir Robert.
I do hope you're not going to plunge us into a European war.
There is no danger at present.
You are very late.
Have you missed me?
Awfully.
Then I should have stayed away longer. I do so enjoy being missed.
How very selfish of you.
I am very selfish.
You're always telling of your bad qualities, Lord Goring.
They are quite dreadful. When I think of them at night, I go to sleep at once.
Well, I delight in your bad qualities. I wouldn't have you part with any one of them.
How very nice of you to say so, but then you're always very nice. Miss Mabel, I want to ask you a question. Who brought Mrs. Cheveley here? That woman in heliotrope who's just gone out of the room with your brother.
Oh, I think Lady Martley brought her. Why do you ask?
Oh, no reason. Haven't seen her in years, that's all.
What an absurd reason.
All the reasons are absurd, Miss Mabel.
What sort of a woman is she?
Oh, a genius in the daytime and a beauty at night.
Oh, I dislike her already.
That shows your ample good taste.
Ha! The English young lady is a dragon of good taste, is she not?
So the newspapers are always telling us.
I read all your English newspapers. I find them so amusing.
Then my dear non-chat, you must certainly learn to read between the lines.
I should like to, but my professor objects. May I have the pleasure of escorting you to the music room, mademoiselle?
Delighted, Vicomte. Quite delighted. Aren't you coming to the music room?
Not if there's any music going on, Miss Mabel.
The music is in German. You would not understand it.
Well, sir, what are you doing here? Wasting your life as usual? I heard of you the other night, dancing at Lady Rufford's till 4 o'clock in the morning.
Only a quarter to 4, Father.
Can't make out how you stand London society. The thing has gone to the dogs. A lot of damn nobody's talking about nothing.
Oh, I love talking about nothing. It's the only thing I know anything about.
You seem to me to be living entirely for pleasure.
What else is there to live for? Nothing ages like happiness.
You are heartless, sir, very heartless.
I hope not. Good evening, Lady Basildon.
Are you here? I had no idea you ever came to political parties.
I simply adore political parties. They're the only places left in London where nobody talks about politics.
Oh, I delight in talking politics. I talk them all day long, but I can't bear listening to them. I don't know how those poor men in the House stand these long debates.
By never listening.
Really?
Of course. Any man who listens is a thoroughly unreasonable person.
Oh, that accounts for so much in men that I have never understood, and so much in women that their husbands never appreciated them.
Our husbands never appreciate anything in us. We have to go to others for that.
Yes, always to others, have we not?
And those are the views of the women known to have the two most admirable husbands in London.
And that is exactly what we can't stand. My Reginald is quite hopelessly faultless. He is really unendurably so. There's not the smallest element of excitement in knowing him.
How terrible. Really, the thing should be more widely known.
Basildon is quite as bad. He is as domestic as if he were a bachelor.
Oh, my dear Olivia, we have married perfect husbands and we are well punished for it.
I should think it's the husbands who are punished.
Oh no, they're as happy as possible. And as for trusting us, it is tragic how much they trust us.
Perfectly tragic.
Or comic, Lady Basildon.
Certainly not comic, Lord Goring. How unkind of you to suggest such a thing.
I'm afraid Lord Goring is in the camp of the enemy. As usual, I saw him talking with Mrs. Cheveley when he came in.
Handsome woman, Mrs. Cheveley.
Please do not praise other women in our presence, Lord Goring. You might wait for us to do that.
I did wait.
Well, we are not going to praise her. I hear that on Monday night she went to the opera and told Tommy Trafford at supper that as far as she can see, London society is entirely made up of dowders and danders.
Quite right too. The men are all dowdies and the women are all dandies.
Oh, you really think that's what Mrs. Cheveley meant?
Quite right too, and it's a very sensible remark for Mrs. Cheveley to make.
Why are you all talking about Mrs. Cheveley? Everyone is talking about Mrs. Cheveley. Lord Goring, what was it you said about Mrs. Cheveley? Oh yes, she's a genius in the daytime and a beauty at night.
What a horrid combination. So very unnatural.
I like looking at geniuses and listening to beautiful people.
That is morbid of you, Miss Marchmont.
Oh, I am so glad to hear you say that. Oh, Marchmont and I have been married for 7 years, and not once has he called me morbid. Oh, men are so painfully unobservant. They never think of these things.
I have always said, dear Margaret, that you were the most morbid person in all of London.
Olivia, you're always so sympathetic.
Is it morbid to have a desire for food? I have a great desire for food. Lord Goring, will you give me some supper?
With pleasure, Miss Mabel.
I don't... You haven't talked to me the whole evening. I don't think I like you at all tonight.
How could I? You went away with a child diplomatist.
You might have followed us. Pursuit would have been only polite.
I like you immensely.
Well, I wish you'd show it in a more marked way.
Olivia, I have the curious feeling of absolute faintness. I think I should like some supper very much. I know I should like some supper.
I am positively dying for some, Margaret.
Men are so horribly selfish. They never think of these things.
Men are grossly material. Grossly material.
May I have the honour of taking you down to supper, Countess?
I never take supper. Thank you, Vicomte. Oh, but I will come down with you with pleasure.
I am so fond of eating. I am quite English in all my tastes.
You look quite English, Vicomte. Quite English.
Like some supper, Mrs. Marchmont?
Thank you, Mr. Montfort. But I don't touch supper. But I will sit beside you and watch you.
I'm not sure I should like being watched while I'm eating.
Then I shall watch someone else.
I'm not sure I should like that either.
Pray, Mr. Montfort, do not make these painful scenes of jealousy in public.
Houses before you leave England, Mrs. Cheveley.
Oh no, I can't stand your English house parties. In England, people actually try to be brilliant at breakfast. That is so dreadful of them. Only dull people are brilliant at breakfast. And then the family skeleton is always reading family prayers. My stay in England really depends on you, Sir Robert.
Seriously?
Quite seriously. I want to talk to you about a great political and financial scheme. About this Argentine Canal Company, in fact.
What a tedious practical subject for you to talk about, Mrs. Cheveley.
Oh, I like tedious practical subjects. What I don't like are tedious practical people. There is a wide difference. Besides, you are interested, I know, in international canal schemes. You were Lord Radley's secretary, weren't you, when the government bought the Suez Canal shares?
Well, yes, but the Suez Canal was a very great and splendid undertaking. It gave us our direct route to India. It had imperial value. This Argentine scheme is a commonplace stock exchange swindle.
A speculation, Sir Robert, a brilliant, daring speculation.
Believe me, Mrs. Cheveley, it is a swindle. Let us call things by their proper names. It makes matters simpler. We have all the information about it at the Foreign Office. In fact, I sent out a private investigation to look into the matter privately, and, well, they report that the works are hardly begun. And as for the money already subscribed, well, no one seems to know what has become of it. The whole thing is a second Panama, and with not a quarter of the chance of success that that miserable affair ever had. I hope you have not invested in it, Mrs. Cheveley. I'm sure you are far too clever to have done that.
I have invested very largely in it.
Who could have advised you to do such a foolish thing?
Your old friend. And mine.
Who?
Baron Arnheim.
Oh, yes. I remember hearing at the time of his death that he was mixed up in the whole affair.
It was his last romance. His last but one, to do him justice.
But you have not seen my Corot yet. They are in the music room. Corots go so well with music, don't they? May I show them to you?
I'm not in a mood tonight for silver twilights or rose-pink dawns. I want to talk business.
I fear I have no advice to give you, Mrs. Cheveley, except to perhaps interest yourself in something less dangerous. The success of the canal depends, of course, on the attitude of England, and I intend to lay my report before the House tomorrow night.
That you must not do in your own interest, Sir Robert, to say nothing of mine. You must not do that.
My own interests, Mrs. Cheveley. Whatever do you mean?
Sir Robert, I will be quite frank with you. I want you to withdraw the report that you have intended to lay before the House on the ground that you have reason to believe that the commissioners have been prejudiced or misinformed or something. And then I want you to say a few words to the effect that the government is going to reconsider the question and that you have reasons to believe that the canal, if completed, will be of great international value. You know the sort of thing that ministers say in cases of this kind. A few ordinary platitudes will do. In modern life, nothing produces such an effect as a good platitude. It makes the whole world kin. Will you do that for me?
Mrs. Cheveley, you cannot be serious in making me such a proposition.
I am quite serious.
Pray, allow me to believe that you are not.
Ah, but I am. And if you do what I ask you, I will pay you very handsomely.
Pay me?
Yes.
Mrs. Cheveley, if you will allow me, I will call your carriage for you. You seem to have lived so long abroad that you seem unable to realise that you are talking to an English gentleman.
I realise that I am talking to a man who laid the foundations of his fortune by selling to a stock exchange speculator a cabinet secret.
What do you mean?
I mean, I know the real origin of your wealth and career. And I've got your letter too.
What letter?
The letter you wrote to Baron Arnheim when you were Lord Radley's secretary, telling the Baron to buy Suez Canal shares, a letter written 3 days before the government announced its own purchase.
It's not true.
You thought that letter had been destroyed. How foolish of you. It is in my possession.
The affair to which you allude was no more than a speculation. The House of Commons had not yet passed the bill. It might have been rejected.
It was a swindle, Sir Robert. Let us call things by their proper names. It makes everything simpler. And now I'm going to sell you that letter, and the price I ask is your public support of the Argentine scheme. You made your own fortune out of one canal. Now you must help me and my friends to make our fortunes out of another.
It is infamous what you propose, infamous.
Oh no. This is a game of life, Sir Robert, as we all have to play it sooner or later.
I cannot do what you ask me.
You have to. You mean you cannot help doing it? You know you are standing on the edge of a precipice, and it is not for you to make terms, it is for you to accept them. Supposing you refuse.
What then?
My dear Sir Robert, what then? You are ruined, that is all. Remember to what a point your Puritanism in England has brought you. In old days, nobody pretended to be a bit better than his neighbours. In fact, to be a bit better than one's neighbour was considered excessively vulgar and middle class. Nowadays, with a modern mania for morality, everybody has to pose as a paragon of purity, incorruptibility, and all the other 7 deadly virtues. And what is the result? You all go over like ninepins, one after the other. Not a year passes in England without somebody disappearing. Scandal used to lend charm, or at least interest, to a man. Now it crushes him. And yours is a very nasty scandal. You couldn't survive it. If it were known that as a young man, secretary to a great and important minister, you sold a cabinet secret for a large sum of money, and that was the origin of your wealth and career, you would be hounded out of public life. You would disappear completely. And after all, Sir Robert, why should you sacrifice your entire future rather than deal diplomatically with your enemy? For the moment, I am your enemy. I admit it. And I'm much stronger than you are. The big battalions are on my side. You have a splendid position, but it is your splendid position that makes you so vulnerable. You can't defend it. And I'm in attack. Of course, I have not talked morality to you. You must admit, in fairness, I have spared you that. Years ago, you did a clever, unscrupulous thing. It turned out a great success. You owe to it your fortune and position. And now you have to pay for it. Sooner or later, we have all to pay for what we do. You have to pay now. Before I leave you tonight, you have got to promise me to suppress your report and to speak in the House in favour of this scheme.
What you ask is impossible.
Oh, you must make it possible. You are going to make it possible. Sir Robert, you know what your English newspapers are like. Suppose that when I leave this house, I drive down to some newspaper office and give them this scandal and the proofs of it. Think of their loathsome joy, of the delights they would have in dragging you down, of the mud and mire they would plunge you in. Think of the hypocrite with his greasy smile, penning his leading article and arranging the foulness of the public placard.
Stop! You want me to withdraw the report and to make a short speech stating that I believe there are possibilities in this scheme?
Those are my terms.
I will pay you any sum of money you want.
Even you are not rich enough, Sir Robert, to buy back your past. No man is. I'm going to go if you don't want to sort this out.
Wait! What did you propose? You said you'd give me back my letter, didn't you?
Yes, that is agreed. I will be in the ladies' gallery tomorrow night at 11:30. If by that time, and you will have had heaps of opportunity, you have made an announcement to the House in the terms I wish, I will hand you back your letter with the prettiest thanks, and the best, or at any rate the most suitable compliment I can think of. I intend to play quite fairly with you, Sir Robert. One should always play fairly when one has the winning cards. The Baron taught me that, amongst other things.
You must give me more time to consider your proposal.
No, you must settle now.
Give me a week. 3 days.
Impossible. I have got to telegraph to Vienna tonight.
My God, what brought you into my life?
Circumstances.
Stop. I consent. The report shall be withdrawn. I shall ensure a question is put to me on the subject.
Thank you. I knew we would come to an amicable agreement. I understood your nature from the first. I analysed you, though you did not adore me. And now you can get my carriage for me. I hear the people coming back from supper. And Englishmen always get romantic after a meal, and that bores me dreadfully.
Well, dear Mrs. Cheveley, I hope you've enjoyed yourself. Sir Robert is very entertaining, is he not?
Oh, most entertaining. I have enjoyed my talk with him immensely.
He's had a most interesting and brilliant career, and he's married a most admirable wife. Lady Chiltern is a woman of the very highest principles, I'm glad to say. I'm a little too old now myself to trouble about setting a good example, although I always admire people who do. And Lady Chiltern has a very ennobling effect on life. Oh, dinner parties can be a little dull sometimes, but one can't have everything, can one? And now, I must go, dear. Shall I call for you tomorrow?
Oh, thanks.
We might drive in the park at 5. Everything looks so fresh in the park now.
Except the people.
Ah, perhaps the people are a little jaded. I have often observed that the season as it goes on produces a kind of softening of the brain. However, I believe anything is better than high intellectual pressure. That is the most unbecoming thing there is. It makes the noses of the young girls so particularly large. And there's nothing so difficult to marry as a large nose. Men don't like them. And goodbye, dear. Goodbye, Gertrude.
What a charming house you have, Lady Chiltern. I've spent a delightful evening. It's been so interesting getting to know your husband.
Why did you wish to know my husband, Mrs. Cheveley?
Oh, I will tell you. I wanted to talk to him about a great political and financial scheme about this Argentine Canal Company, of which I dare say you have heard. And I found him most susceptible. Susceptible to reason, I mean. A rare thing in a man. I converted him in 10 minutes. He's going to make an announcement in the House tomorrow night in favour of the idea. We must go to the ladies' gallery and hear him. It will be a great occasion.
But there must be some mistake. That scheme could never have my husband's support.
Oh, I assure you it is all settled. I don't regret my tedious journey from Vienna now. It has been a great success. But of course, for the next 24 hours, the whole thing is a dead secret.
A secret? Between whom?
Between your husband and myself.
Your carriage is here, Mrs. Cheveley.
Thank you. Good evening, Lady Chiltern. Good night, Lord Goring. I'm at Claridge's. Don't you think you might leave a card?
If you wish it, Mrs. Cheveley.
Oh, don't be so solemn about it, or I shall be obliged to leave a card on you. In England, I suppose that would hardly be considered on brag. Abroad, we are more civilised. Will you see me out, Sir Robert? Now that we have both the same interest at heart, we will be great friends, I hope. What a horrid woman.
You should go to bed, Miss Mabel.
Lord Goring.
My own father told me to go to bed an hour ago, and I don't see why I should give you the same advice. I always pass on good advice. It's the only thing to do with it. So I've never ever used one step.
Lord Goring, you're always ordering me out of the room. I think it most courageous of you, especially when I'm not going to go to bed for hours. Oh, you can come and sit if you like and talk to me about anything under the sun, except the Royal Academy, Mrs. Cheveley, or novels in the Scottish dialect. They are not improving subjects. What's this? Someone has dropped a diamond brooch. Quite beautiful, isn't it? I wonder whose it is. I wish it was mine. But Gertrude won't let me wear anything but pearls, and I'm thoroughly sick of pearls, and they look so plain and good and intellectual. I wonder who it belongs to.
I wonder who dropped it.
It is a handsome brooch.
It's a handsome bracelet.
It isn't a bracelet, it's a brooch.
It can also be used as a bracelet.
What are you doing?
Miss Mabel, I'm going to make a rather strange request of you.
Pray do. I've been waiting for it the whole evening.
Don't tell anyone I've taken charge of this bracelet. If anybody writes to claim it, let me know at once.
Oh, that is a strange request.
Yes, you see, I gave it as a gift to somebody once years ago.
You did?
Yes.
Then I shall certainly bid you good night. Good night, Gertrude.
Good night, dear. You saw who Mrs. Cheveley brought here tonight?
Yes, rather unpleasant surprise. What did she come here for?
Apparently to try to lure Robert to uphold some fraudulent scheme in which he's interested. The Argentine Canal, in fact.
She's rather mistaken her man, hasn't she?
She She's hardly capable of understanding an upright nature such as my husband's.
I should fancy she came to some grief if she tried to get Robert into her toils. It's extraordinary what mistakes clever women make.
I don't call women of that kind clever. I call them stupid.
Same thing often. And now I must be going. Good night, Miss Lady Chilton.
Good night.
My dear Arthur, you're not going. Do stop a little.
I'm afraid I must. I said I'd stop when at the Hardlocks. Apparently they've got a Mo Hungarian band playing Mo Hungarian music. See you soon. Goodbye.
Gertrude, how beautiful you look tonight.
It's not true, is it? You're not going to lend your support to this Argentine speculation? You couldn't.
Who told you I intended to do so?
That woman who has just gone out, Mrs. Cheveley as she calls herself now. Robert, I know this woman. You don't. We were at school together. She was awful, an evil influence on anyone whose trust or friendship she could win. She stole things. She was a thief. She was sent away for being a thief. Robert, why do you let this woman influence you?
Gertrude, what you say may be true, but it has been many years since then. It is best forgotten. Mrs. Cheveley may have changed. No one should be entirely judged upon their past.
One's past is what one is, Robert. It is the only way by which people should be judged.
That is a hard saying, Gertrude.
It is a true saying, Robert. And what did she mean by boasting that she got you to lend your support, your name, to a scheme that I've heard you describe as the most scandalous scheme there's ever been in political life?
I was mistaken in the view I took. We all may make mistakes.
But you said yesterday that you had received a report from the Commission and that it entirely condemned the whole thing.
I have reason to believe now that the Commissioners were prejudiced or at any rate misinformed. Besides, Gertrude, public and private lives are different things. They have different laws and move on different lines.
They should both represent man at his highest. I see no difference between them.
In the present case, it is a matter of practical politics, that is all.
All?
Yes.
Robert! Oh, why are you speaking so differently tonight from the way I've always heard you talk? Why are you changed?
I am not changed, but circumstances alter things.
Circumstances should never alter principles.
But what if I were to tell you?
What?
That it was necessary, vitally necessary.
It could never be necessary to do what is not honourable. Or if it be necessary, then what is it that I've loved? But it is not, Robert. Tell me it is not. Robert, are you telling me the whole truth?
Why do you ask me such a question?
Why do you not answer?
The truth is a very complex thing, and politics is a very complex business. There are wheels within wheels. One may be under certain obligations to someone that one must pay. Sooner or later in political life, one has to compromise. Everyone does.
Compromise? Oh, Robert, I know that there are men who, in some horrible moment of shame, have to commit some horrible act of shame, and then, in some later moment, have to pay for it by committing some other act. Robert, tell me you are not such as they are. Tell me at once that...
That what?
That our lives may drift apart.
Drift apart?
That they may be entirely separate. It would be better for us both.
Gertrude, there is nothing in my past life that you might not know.
I was sure of it, Robert. I was sure of it. But then why did you say those horrible things? Things so unlike your real self. Let us never talk of the subject again. You will write, won't you, to Mrs. Cheveley and let her know that you cannot support this scandalous scheme of hers?
Must I write and tell her that?
Surely, what else is there to do?
I might see her personally. It would be better.
No! You must write at once, now, this moment, and let your letter show her that your decision is quite irrevocable.
Right, this moment.
Yes.
But it is so late, it is close on 12.
That makes no matter. She must know at once that she has been mistaken in you, and that you are not a person to do something base or underhand or dishonest. Write here, Robert. Write that you decline to support this scheme of hers, as you hold it to be a dishonest scheme. Yes, write the word dishonest. She knows what that word means. Yes, that will do. And now the envelope. once to Claridge's Hotel. There is no answer. Robert, love gives one an instinct to things. I feel tonight as if I have saved you from something that may have been a danger to you, from something that may have made men honour you less than they do. I don't think you realise sufficiently, Robert, that you have brought into the political life of our time a nobler atmosphere, a freer air of purer aims and higher ideals. I know it, and for that, I love you, Robert.
Love me always, Gertrude. Love me always.
I will love you always, for you will always be worthy of love. Our needs must love the highest when we see it.
Put out the lights, Mason. Put out the lights.
It's a very awkward business, very awkward indeed. You should have told your wife the whole thing. Secrets from other people's wives are necessary luxury in modern life. At least that's what I'm told by people in the club who are bold enough to know better. A man should not have a secret from his own wife. She invariably finds it out. Women have a wonderful instinct for these things. They discover everything except the obvious.
Arthur, when could I have told my wife? Not last night. It would have produced a lifelong separation between us, and I would have lost the love of the one woman in the world that I worship. The one woman who stirs love within me. Last night it would have been quite impossible. She would have turned to me in horror and in contempt.
Is Lady Chiltern as perfect as all that?
Yes, my wife is as perfect as all that.
What a pity. I beg your pardon, my dear fellow. I didn't quite mean it like that. But if what you tell me about Lady Chiltern is true, I should like to have a serious talk to her about life.
It would be quite useless.
May I try?
Yes, but nothing will make her alter her views.
Well, at worst, it would simply be a psychological experiment.
All such experiments are terribly dangerous.
Everything is dangerous, my dear fellow. If it wasn't so, life wouldn't be worth living. Of course, I am bound to tell you that I think you should have told her years ago.
When? When we were engaged? Do you really think, Arthur, that she would have married me knowing that the origin of my fortune is such as it is? The basis of my career such as it is? And that I did something that most men would call shameful and dishonourable?
Yes, most men would call it ugly names, there's no doubt about that.
Men who every day do something of a similar kind themselves. Men who each one of them have worse secrets in their own lives.
And that's why they're so pleased to find out other people's secrets. It distracts public attention from their own.
And besides, who did I hurt by what I did? No one.
Except yourself, Robert.
It is true. I had private information about a certain transaction contemplated by the government of the day, and I acted on it. Private information is practically the source of every large modern fortune.
Yes, and public scandal invariably results.
Do you really think, Arthur, that something I did nearly 18 years ago should be brought up against me now? Is it fair that a man should be punished for something done in one's boyhood almost? I was 22 at the time, and I had the double misfortune of being well-born and poor. Two unforgivable things nowadays. Is it fair that the folly, the sin of one's youth, if men choose to call it a sin, should ruin a life like mine, should place me in the pillory, should shatter all that I've worked for, all that I've built up? Is it fair, Arthur?
Life is never fair, Robert, and perhaps it's a good thing for most of us that it is not.
Every man of ambition has to fight his century with its own weapons. What this century worships is wealth. The god of this century is wealth. At all costs one must have wealth. To succeed, one must have wealth.
You underrate yourself, Robert. Without wealth, you'd have succeeded just as well.
When I was old, perhaps. Or when I had lost my passion for power, or couldn't choose it. When I was tired, worn out, disappointed. I wanted my success when I was young. Youth is the time for success. I couldn't wait.
Well, you certainly had your success while you were still young. No one in our days achieved such brilliant success. Under Secretary for Foreign Affairs at the age of 40. That's good enough for anyone, I should think.
What if it is all taken away from me now? If I lose everything over a horrible scandal, if I am hounded from public life...
Robert, how could you have sold yourself for money?
I did not sell myself for money. I bought success at a great price, that is all.
Well, you certainly paid a great price for it. But what first made you think of doing such a thing?
Baron Arnheim.
Damned scoundrel.
No! He was a man of the most subtle and refined intellect. A man of culture, charm and distinction. One of the most intellectual men I ever met.
Ah, I prefer a gentlemanly fool myself. There's more to be said for stupidity than most people imagine. Personally, I have a great admiration for stupidity. Sort of fellow feeling, I suppose. But how did you do it? Tell me the whole thing.
Well, one night after dinner at Lord Radley's, the Baron began talking about success in modern life as something that one could reduce to an absolutely definite science. With that wonderfully fascinating quiet voice of his, he expounded to us the most terrible of all philosophies, the philosophy of power. Preached to us the most marvellous of all gospels, the gospel of gold. He must have seen the effect it had produced on me, for some days afterwards he wrote and asked me to come and see him. He was living then in Park Lane, in the house Lord Waltham has now. I remember so well how, with a strange smile on his pale curved lips, he led me through his wonderful picture gallery. Showed me his tapestries, his enamels, his jewels, his carved ivories, and made me wonder at the strange loveliness of the luxury in which he lived. He then told me that luxury was nothing but a background and a painted scene in a play, and that power over others, power over the world, was the one thing worth having, the one supreme pleasure worth knowing, and the one joy one never tired of. But that in our century, only the rich possess it.
A thoroughly shallow creed.
I didn't think so then, and I don't think so now. Wealth gave me enormous power. It gave me at the very outset of my life freedom, and freedom is everything. You have never been poor, and never known what ambition is. You cannot understand the wonderful chance the Baron gave me, a chance that few men get.
Fortunately for them, if one is to judge by results. But how did the Baron persuade you to do what you did?
As I was going away, the Baron said that if I ever had any private information of real value, it would make me a very rich man. I was dazed at the prospect the Baron held out to me, and my ambition and desire for power were at that time boundless. 6 weeks later, certain private documents passed through my hands.
State documents?
Yes.
I had no idea that you, of all the people in the world, Robert, would be so weak as to yield such temptation the Baron held out to you.
Weak? I'm sick of hearing that phrase, sick of using it about others. Weak? Do you really think, Arthur, that it is weakness that yields to temptation? I tell you there are terrible temptations that it takes strength and courage to yield to. To stake one's whole life on a single moment, to risk everything on one throw, whether the stakes be power or pleasure, I care not. There is no weakness there. There is a horrible, a terrible courage. I have that courage. I sat down the same afternoon and wrote Baron Arnheim the letter this woman now holds. He made $750,000 over the transaction.
And you?
I received from the Baron £110,000.
You are worth much more, Robert.
No! That money gave me exactly what I wanted, power over others. I went into the house immediately. The Baron advised me on finance from time to time, and before 5 years I had almost trebled my fortune. Since then, everything I have touched has turned out a success. In all matters connected with money, I have had a luck so extraordinary that it has made me almost afraid. I remember reading somewhere in some strange book that when the gods wish to punish us, they answer our prayers.
But tell me, did you never suffer any regret for what you had done?
No, I thought I had fought the century with its own weapons and won.
You thought you had won?
I thought so. Arthur, do you despise me for what I've told you?
I'm very sorry for you, Robert. Very sorry indeed.
I don't say that I felt any remorse, well, not in the ordinary, rather silly sense of the word. But I have paid conscience money many times. I had a wild hope I could disarm destiny. The sum the Baron gave me I have distributed twice over in public charities since then.
Public charities? Dear me, what a lot of harm you must have done.
Don't say that, Arthur. Don't talk like that.
Oh, don't listen to what I say. I'm always saying what I want to say. In fact, I usually say what I really think. It's a great danger nowadays, makes one so liable to be misunderstood. As regards this matter, of course, I'll help you in whatever way I can. You know that.
Thank you, Arthur. But what is to be done? What can be done?
Well, the English can't stand a man who says he's always in the right. But they are very fond of a man who admits he's been in the wrong. It's one of the very best things in them. However, in your case, a confession would not do. The money, if you allow me to say so, is awkward. If you were to make a clean breast of the whole affair, you'd never be able to talk morality again. And in England, if a man can't talk morality twice a week to a large popular moral audience, he's quite over as a serious politician. There'd be nothing left to him as a career except botany or the church. No, a confession would be of no use. It would ruin you.
It would ruin me, Arthur. I suppose the only thing to do now is to fight the thing out.
I've been waiting for you to say that, Robert. And we must begin by telling your wife the whole thing.
That I will not do.
Robert, you are wrong. Believe me, you are wrong.
I couldn't tell my wife. It would kill her love for me. But now, about this woman, this Mrs. Cheever. You knew her before, apparently, Arthur.
Yes.
Did you know her well?
Oh, only so little that I got engaged to be married to her once, when I was staying at the Tenbys. The whole affair lasted 3 days, nearly.
And why was it broken off?
Oh, I forget. Or at least it doesn't matter. By the way, have you tried her with money? She was always confoundedly fond of money.
I offered her any sum of money she wanted, and she refused.
Then the marvellous gospel of gold breaks down sometimes. The rich can't do everything after all.
Not everything, Arthur. I suppose you're right. I've never known terror before, but I know it now. It is as if a hand of ice were laid upon one's heart. It is as if one's heart were beating itself to death in some empty hollow.
Robert, you must fight her. You must fight her!
But how?
I can't tell you how at present. I haven't the smallest idea. But every person has some weakness. Every person has some flaw. My own father says even I have faults. Perhaps I have. I don't know.
In defending myself against Mrs. Cheever, I have the right to use whatever weapons I can find, have I not?
In your place, I shouldn't have the smallest scruple in doing so. She's thoroughly well able to take care of herself.
Then I shall write a cipher telegram to Vienna, asking them whether anything is known against her. Perhaps there is some secret that she is ashamed of?
Yes, I should think Mrs. Cheever finds scandals as becoming as a new bonnet, and airs both of me every afternoon in the pub at 5:30. She adores scandals. I imagine the great sorrow of her life at present that she cannot manage to have enough of them.
Why do you say that?
She wore too much rouge last night and not enough clothes. That is always a sign of despair.
But it is worth my while wiring to Vienna, is it not?
It's always worthwhile asking the question. It's not always worthwhile answering one.
Is Sir Robert in his room?
Yes, Sir Robert.
Have him send this off in cipher at once. There must not be a moment's delay.
Yes, Sir Robert.
Excuse me, but give back to me a second. She seems to have a curious hold over the Baron. I wonder what it was.
I wonder.
I will fight her to the death, Arthur, as long as my wife knows nothing.
Fight her in any case, in any case.
If my wife were to find out, there would be very little left to fight for. Well, as soon as I hear back from the embassy, I shall let you know the result. There is a chance, just a chance, but I believe in it. And as I fought the century with its own weapons, I shall fight her with her own weapons. It is only fair, and she looks like a woman with a past, doesn't she?
Most pretty women do. There is a fashion in past, just as there is a fashion in frocks. Perhaps Mrs. Cheever's is merely a slightly décolleté one, and they are excessively popular nowadays. And I shall not build too high hopes on frightening Mrs. Cheever. I should fancy she is not a woman to be easily frightened. She has seen off all her creditors and shows remarkable presence of mind.
I live on hope now. I clutch at every chance. I feel like a man on a ship that is sinking. The water is round my feet and the air is bitter with storm. Oh, I hear my wife's voice.
Good morning, Lord Goring.
Good morning, Lady Chiltern. Have you been in the park?
No, I've just come from the Women's Liberal Association, where, by the way, Robert, your name was received with loud applause, and I've just come in to have my tea. You will wait and have some tea, won't you?
I'll wait for a short time, thanks.
I'll be back in a moment. I'm only going to take my hat off.
Oh, please don't. It is such a wonderful hat. I've never seen a hat so pretty. I hope it's received the Liberal Association with loud applause.
We have far more important work to do than discuss each other's bonnets, Lord Goring.
Really? What sort of work?
Dull, useful, delightful things. Factory Acts, female inspectors, the parliamentary franchise, the 8 Hours Bill. Everything, in fact, which you would find thoroughly uninteresting.
And never bonnets?
Never bonnets. Never.
You have been a good friend to me, Arthur. A thoroughly good friend.
I don't know that I've been able to do anything for you, as yet. In fact, I'm not sure I've been able to do anything at all. I'm thoroughly disappointed in myself.
No, you have allowed me to tell you the truth. And that is something. The truth has always stifled me.
The truth is a bad habit, and you should get rid of it as soon as possible. It makes you so unpopular with the older members of the club. They call it conceited. Perhaps it is.
I wish to God I had been able to tell the truth. To live the truth. It is a great thing to live the truth. I shall see you soon again, shan't I, Arthur?
Certainly. I shall come round tomorrow morning. I'm going to the bachelor's ball tonight unless I find something better to do. But as I say, I'll be here tomorrow morning. If you want me before then, send a note round to Curzon Street.
Thank you.
You're not leaving, Robert?
I have some letters to write in.
You work too hard, Robert. You seem never to think of yourself, and you're looking so tired.
It is nothing, dear. It is nothing.
Do sit down. I'm so glad you have called. I wanted to talk to you about, well, not about bonnets or the Women's Liberal Association. You seem to take far too much interest in the first subject and not nearly enough in the second.
You wish to talk to me about Mrs. Cheveley?
Yes, you've guessed it. After you left last night, I found out what Mrs. Cheveley said was really true. Of course I made Robert write to her immediately, withdrawing his promise.
So he gave me to understand.
To have kept it would have been the first stain on a career that has been stainless always. Robert's not like other men. He needs to be above reproach. Don't you agree with me? You're Robert's greatest friend. You're our greatest friend, Lord Goring. He has no secrets from me, and I don't think he has any from you either.
He certainly has no secrets from me, as far as I know.
Then I am not right in my estimate of him. I know I'm right, but speak to me frankly.
Quite frankly.
Surely, you have nothing to conceal, do you?
Nothing. But if you allow me to say that in practical life,
Of which you know so little, Lord Goring.
of which I know nothing by experience but something by observation, I think that in practical life there's something about success, actual success, that is a little unscrupulous, and something about ambition that is unscrupulous always. When a man has set his heart and soul on a certain point, if he has to climb the crag, he climbs the crag. If he has to walk in the mire,
Well?
he walks in the mire. Of course, I'm only talking generally about life.
I hope so. Why do you look at me so strangely, Lord Goring?
Lady Chiltern, I've sometimes thought that perhaps you're a little hard in your views on life, that you don't make sufficient allowances. In every nature there is weakness, or worse than weakness. Now imagine a modern man, a man like my Lord Merton, my father, or Robert, for instance, had years ago written a letter to someone, a foolish letter.
What do you mean by a foolish letter?
A letter gravely compromising one's position. Of course, I'm only putting an imaginary case.
Robert is as incapable of doing a foolish thing as he is of doing a wrong thing.
Nobody's incapable of doing a foolish thing. Nobody's incapable of doing a wrong thing.
Are you a pessimist? What will the other dandies say? They'll all have to go into mourning.
No, Lady Chiltern, I'm not a pessimist. In fact, I'm not sure I really know what pessimism means. All I know is that this life cannot be understood without much charity, cannot be lived without much charity. It is love and not German philosophy that's the explanation of this world, whatever the explanation may be of the next. But if you should ever find yourself in trouble, Lady Chiltern, trust me absolutely. If you need my help, come to me at once.
Lord Goring, you're talking quite seriously. I don't think I've ever heard you talk seriously before.
I beg your pardon, Lady Chiltern. I can assure you it won't happen again.
But I like you to be serious.
Dear Gertrude, don't say such a thing to Lord Goring. Seriousness with the most unbecoming to him. Good afternoon, Lord Goring. Pray be as friendly as you can.
I should like to, but I'm afraid I'm a little out of practice. Besides, I really should be going now.
But just when I have come in, what dreadful manners you have. I'm sure you were very badly brought up.
I was.
I wish I had brought you up.
I wish you had too.
It is too late now, I suppose.
I'm not so sure.
Will you rise tomorrow?
Yes, tomorrow at 10.
Don't forget.
Of course I shan't. By the way, Lady Chiltern, I did not see a list of guests in the Morning Post of today. It was taken up by something boring like Lambeth Conference or the County Council or something equally boring. Would you let me have a list? I have a particular reason in asking you.
I'm sure Mr. Trafford would be able to get you one.
Thank you so very much.
Tommy is the most useful person in London.
And who's the most ornamental?
I am.
How clever you to guess it. Goodbye, Lady Chiltern.
Oh, Lord Goring, I wish you were not going. I've had 4.5 wonderful adventures this morning. You might stop and listen to some of them.
4.5? How selfish of you. There won't be left for me.
I don't want you to have any. They would not be good for you.
How unkind of you. The first unkind thing you've ever said to me. And how charmingly you said it. 10 tomorrow?
Sharp.
Sharp. And don't bring Mr. Trafford.
Oh, of course I shan't bring Tommy Trafford. Tommy Trafford is in great disgrace.
I'm delighted to hear it. Goodbye, Miss Maple.
Gertrude, I wish you would speak to Tommy Trafford.
What has poor Mr. Trafford done this time? Robert thinks he's the best secretary he's ever had.
Well, Tommy has proposed to me. Again. Tommy really does nothing but propose to me. He proposed to me last night when I was in the music room, when I was quite unprotected. This was an elaborate trio going on. And he dared hardly make the smallest repartee, and he'd hardly tell you. If I had, it would have stopped the music at once. And musical people are so absurdly unreasonable. They always want to be perfectly deaf at the moment when one is longing to be absolutely dumb. Deaf, even. That's how cross he made me. Then, today, he proposed to me again in broad daylight in front of that dreadful statue of the Achilles. Really, the things that go on in front of that work of art are quite appalling. The police should interfere. Then, at luncheon, I saw by the glare in his eye that he was going to propose again. I just managed to check him in time by assuring him that I was a bimetallist. I don't quite know what bimetallism means. I don't believe anybody else does either. But the observation crushed Tommy for quite 10 minutes. And then Tommy is so annoying in the way that he proposes. If he proposed at the top of his voice, I should not mind so much. That might at least draw some attention from the public. Whenever Tommy wants to be romantic, he does it in such a horrid, confidential way. Just like a doctor. Oh, I am very fond of Tommy. But, Gertrude, I wish you would speak to him and tell him that once a week is quite often enough to propose to anyone, and should always be done in a manner that attracts some attention.
Dear Mabel, don't talk like that. Besides, Robert thinks very highly of Mr. Trafford. He thinks he has a brilliant future before him.
Oh, I wouldn't marry a man with a future before him for anything under the sun.
Mabel!
I know, dear, you married a man with a future before you, didn't you? But then Robert was a genius, and you have a noble, self-sacrificing character. You can stand geniuses. I have no character at all, so Robert was the only genius I could ever bear. And geniuses are always talking so much, such a bad habit, and they're always thinking about themselves, when I want to be thinking about me. I must go now and rehearse at Lady Basildon's. We're having a bit of a tableau. Do you remember the triumph of something? I'm not sure what. I hope it will be the triumph of me. The only triumph I'm really interested in right now. Goodbye, Gertrude. Gertrude, do you know who's coming to see you? That dreadful Mrs. Cheeley in the most lovely gown. Did you invite her?
Mrs. Cheeley coming to see me? Impossible.
and not nearly so natural.
There's no need to wait, Mabel. Remember Lady Basildon's expecting you.
Oh, but I must speak to Lady Markby. She's delightful. I love being scolded by her.
Lady Markby, Mrs. Cheveley.
Lady Markby, how wonderful of you to come and see me. Won't you sit down, Mrs. Cheveley?
Isn't that Miss Chiltern? I should like so much to know her.
Mabel, Mrs. Cheveley wishes to know you.
I thought your frock so charming last night, Miss Chiltern, so simple and suitable.
Really, I must tell my dressmaker it would be such a surprise for her. Goodbye, Lady Markby.
Going already?
I'm so sorry, but I'm obliged to. I'm after rehearsal, so you stand on my head in some tableau.
On your head, child? Well, I hope not. I believe it is most unhealthy.
Oh, but it's for a most excellent cause, in aid of the undeserving, the only people I'm really interested in. I'm the secretary and Tommy Trafford is treasurer.
And what is Lord Goring?
Lord Goring is president.
The post should suit him admirably, unless he has deteriorated since I knew him first.
You're remarkably modern, Mabel. A little too modern, perhaps. Nothing is so dangerous as being too modern. One is apt to grow old-fashioned quite suddenly. I've known many instances of it.
What a dreadful prospect.
Ah, my dear, you need not worry. You will always be as pretty as can be. That is the best fashion there is, and the only fashion England succeeds in setting.
Thank you, Lady Markby, for England and myself.
Dear Gertrude, we just called to know if Mrs. Cheveley's diamond brooch had been found.
Here.
Yes, I missed it when I got back to Claridge's and thought I might possibly have dropped it here.
Well, I have not seen anything, but I will send for the butler and ask.
Oh, pray don't trouble Lady Chiltern. I dare say I lost it at the opera before we came on here.
Ah, yes, I dare say it was at the opera. The fact is, we all scramble and jostle so much nowadays, I wonder we have a shred on us at the end of an evening. I often find, when I'm coming back from the drawing room, I feel as if I haven't a shred on me. Except, of course, a small shred of decent reputation. Just enough to prevent the lower classes from making painful observations through the windows of the carriage. The fact is that our society has become terribly overpopulated. Really, someone should arrange a proper scheme of assisted emigration. It would do a great deal of good.
I quite agree with you, Lady Markby. It is nearly 6 years since I have been in London for the season, and I must say society has become dreadfully mixed. One sees the oddest people everywhere.
That is quite true, dear. But one needn't know them. I'm sure I don't know half the people who come to my house. Indeed, from all I hear, I shouldn't like to.
What sort of brooch was it that you lost, Mrs. Cheveley?
A diamond snake brooch with a ruby. A rather large ruby.
I thought you said there was a sapphire on the head, dear.
No, Lady Markby. A ruby.
And very becoming, I'm quite sure.
Has a ruby and diamond brooch been found in any of the rooms this morning, Mason?
No, my lady.
It really is of no consequence, Lady Chiltern. I'm so sorry to have put you to any inconvenience.
Oh, it's been of no inconvenience, Mrs. Cheveley. That will do, Mason. You can bring tea.
Well, I must say, it is most annoying to lose anything. I remember once at Bath, years ago, losing in the pump room an exceedingly handsome cameo bracelet that Sir John had given me. I don't think he's ever given me anything since, I'm sorry to say. He has sadly degenerated. Really, this horrid House of Commons quite ruins our husbands for us. I think that the lower house, by far the greatest blow to a happy life that there has been since that terrible thing called the higher education of women was invented.
It is heresy to say that in this house, Lady Markby. Robert is a great champion of the higher education of women, and so, I'm afraid, am I.
The higher education of men is what I should like to see. Men need it so sadly.
They do, dear, but I'm afraid such a scheme would be quite unpractical. I don't think that man has much capacity for advancement. He has got as far as he can, and that is not far, is it? With regard to women, well, dear Gertrude, you belong to the younger generation. I'm sure it's all right if you approve of it. In my time, of course, we were taught not to understand anything. That was the old system, and wonderfully interesting it was too. Why, I can assure you the amount of things I and my poor dear sister were taught not to understand was quite extraordinary. But modern women understand everything, I'm told.
Except their husbands. That is the one thing that modern woman never understands.
And a very good thing too, dear. It might break up many a happy home if they did. Not yours, Gertrude, I need hardly say. You've married a pattern husband. Wish I could say as much for myself. Since Sir John has taken to attending the debates regularly, which he never used to in the good old days, his language has become quite impossible. He always seems to think he's addressing the House, and so, consequently, whenever he discusses the state of the agricultural labourer, or the Welsh Church, or something quite improper of that kind, I'm obliged to send all the servants out of the room. It is not pleasant to see one's own butler, who's been with one for 23 years, actually blushing at the sideboard. And footmen making contortions in corners like persons in circuses. I assure you, my life will be quite ruined unless they send Sir John at once to the upper house. He won't take any interest in politics then, will he? The House of Lords is so civilised, an assembly of gentlemen. But in his present state, Sir John is really a great trial. Why, this morning, before breakfast was half over, he stood up on the hearthrug, put his hands in his pockets, and appealed to the country at the top of his voice. I left the table after my second cup of tea, I need hardly say. His violent language can be heard all over the house. I trust, Gertrude, that Sir Robert is not like that.
But I take great interest in politics, Lady Markby. I love to hear Robert talk about them.
Well, I hope he's not as devoted to blue books as Sir John is. I don't think they can be quite improving reading for anyone.
I have never read a blue book. I prefer books in yellow covers.
Ah, yellow is a gayer colour, is it not? I used to wear yellow a good deal in my early days, and I would do so now if Sir John were not so painfully personal in his observations. And a man on the subject of dress is quite ridiculous, is he not?
Oh no, I think that men are the only authorities on dress.
Really, dear? Well, wouldn't think so from the kind of hats they wear, would one?
Some tea, Mrs. Cheveley.
Thanks.
Would you like some tea, Lady Markby?
No thanks, dear. The fact is, I promised to go round to see poor Lady Brancaster, who's in very great trouble. Her own daughter, quite a well-brought-up girl too, has actually become engaged to be married to a curate in Shropshire. It is very sad can't understand this modern mania for curates. In my time, of course, we girls saw them running about the place like rabbits, but we never took any notice of them, I need hardly say. But I'm told that nowadays, country society is quite honeycombed with them. I think it most irreligious. And then the elder son has quarrelled with the father. So it's said that whenever they meet at the club, Lord Brancaster has to hide behind the money article of the Times. However, that is quite a common occurrence nowadays. Indeed, all the clubs in St James's Street have to take in extra copies of the Times. There are so many sons who won't have anything to do with their fathers, and so many fathers who won't listen to their sons. I think myself it is very much to be regretted.
So do I. Fathers have so much to learn from their sons nowadays.
Really, dear, what?
The art of living. The only really fine art we have produced in modern times.
Well, I'm afraid Lord Brancaster knew a great deal about that. More than his poor wife ever did. You know Lady Brancaster, don't you, dear?
Just slightly. She was staying at the Langtons last autumn while we were there.
Well, like all stout women, she looks the very picture of happiness, as no doubt you noticed. But there are many tragedies in her life besides this affair with the curate. Her own sister, Mrs. Jekyll, lived a most unhappy life through no fault of her own, I'm sorry to say. She ultimately was so broken-hearted, she went into a convent. Or onto the operatic stage. I forget which. No, I think it was a decorative art needlework she took up. I know she lost all sense of pleasure in life. And now, Lady Chiltern, if you will excuse me, and I will leave Mrs. Cheveley in your care and call back for her in a quarter of an hour. Or perhaps, dear Mrs. Cheveley, if you wouldn't mind waiting in the carriage while I'm with Lady Brancaster. As I intended to be a visit of condolence, I shan't stay long.
I don't mind waiting in the carriage at all, provided there is somebody to look at one.
Well, I hear the curate is always prowling about the place.
I'm afraid I'm not fond of girlfriends.
Oh, I do wish Miss Cheveley would stay a little. I'd like to have a few minutes' conversation with her.
Well, how very kind of you, Lady Chiltern. Believe me, nothing could give me greater pleasure.
Oh, no doubt you have many happy reminiscences of your school days to talk over together. So, goodbye, Gertrude. Shall I see you at Lady Bernard's tonight? She has discovered a wonderful new genius who does nothing at all, I believe. And that is a great comfort, is it not?
Robert and I shall be dining at home by ourselves tonight, and I shan't go out afterwards. Robert, of course, will be in the house, but there's nothing interesting on.
Dining at home by yourselves? Is that quite prudent? Oh, I forget. You have married the exception, and I the general rule. And nothing ages a woman so much as having married the general rule.
Wonderful woman, Lady Markby, isn't she? Talks more and says less than anybody I ever met. She's made to be a public speaker, much more so than her husband, though he is a typical English man, always dull and usually violent.
Mrs. Cheveley, I think you should know that if I had known who you really were, I should not have invited you into my house last night.
Really?
I could not have done so.
I see that after all these years, you have not changed a bit, Gertrude.
I never change.
Then life has taught you nothing.
It has taught me that a person who was once guilty of a dishonest and dishonourable act may again be guilty of it and should be shunned.
And would you apply that rule to everyone?
Yes, without exception.
Then I'm sorry for you, Gertrude. Very sorry for you.
You see, now I was quite sure that any further acquaintance between us during your stay here in London was quite impossible.
Do you know, I don't mind your talking morality a bit, Gertrude. Morality is simply the attitude we adopt towards people whom we personally dislike. You dislike me, I am quite aware of that. And I've always detested you. And yet I've come here to do you a service.
Like the service you wished to render my husband last night, I suppose. Thank goodness I saved him from that.
It was you who made him write that insolent letter to me. It was you who made him break his promise.
Yes.
Then you must make him keep it. I give you till tomorrow morning. No more. If by that time your husband does not solemnly bind himself to help me in this great scheme in which I am interested.
This fraudulent speculation.
Call it what you choose. I hold your husband in the hollow of my hand. And if you are wise, you will make him do what I tell him.
You are impertinent. What is my husband to do with you, with a woman like you?
In this world, like meets with like. It is because your husband is himself fraudulent and dishonest that we pair so well together. Between you and him there are chasms. He and I are closer than friends. We are enemies linked together. The same sin binds us.
How dare you class my husband with yourself? How dare you threaten him or me? Leave my house. You are unfit to enter it.
Your house? A house bought with the price of dishonour. A house everything in which has been paid for by fraud. Ask him what the origin of his fortune is. Get him to tell you how he sold to a stockbroker a cabinet secret. Learn from him to what you owe your position.
It's not true. Robert, it's not true.
Look at him. Can he deny it? Does he dare to?
Go! Go at once! You have done your worst now!
My worst? I have not yet finished with you, with either of you. I give you both till tomorrow at noon. If by then you don't do what I bid you to do, the whole world will know the origin of Robert Chiltern.
Show Mrs. Cheveley out.
You sold a cabinet secret for money. You began our life with fraud. You built up a career on dishonour. Tell me it's not true. Lie to me. Lie to me. Tell me it's not true.
What this woman has told you is true. But, Gertrude, you don't know how I was tempted. Let me tell you the whole thing.
Don't come near me. Don't touch me. I feel as though you have soiled me forever. What a mask you've been wearing all these years. A horrible painted mask. You sold yourself for money. Oh, a common thief or better. You were bought in the market. You sold yourself to the highest bidder. You lied to the whole world, and yet you will not lie to me!
Gertrude!
No! Don't speak! Say nothing! Your voice wakes terrible memories. Memories of things that made me love you. Memories of words that made me love you. Memories that are now horrible to me. And how I worshipped you. You were to me something apart from political life. Something pure, noble, honest, without stain. The world seemed finer to me because you were in it, and goodness more real because you lived, and now, when I think that I made of a man like you my ideal.
There was your mistake! There was your error! The error all women commit! Why can't you women love us men, faults and all? Why must you place us on monstrous pedestals? We all have feet of clay, women as well as men. But when we men love women, we love them knowing their weaknesses, their follies, their imperfections. Love them even more, it may be, for that reason. It is not the perfect, but the imperfect who have need of love. It is when we are wounded by our own hands, or by the hands of others, that love should come to cure us. Else what use is love at all? All sins except sins against itself, love should forgive. All lives, save loveless lives, true love should pardon. A man's love is like that. It is wide and large and more human than a woman's. You women think you are making ideals of men. What you are making is false idols merely. You made your false idol of me, and I had not the courage to come down, to show you my wounds, to tell you my weaknesses. I thought I might lose your love, as I have lost it now. And so last night you ruined my life for me. Yes, ruined it. What this woman asked of me was nothing compared to what she offered me. She offered me security, peace, stability. The sin of my youth that I thought buried forever rose before me, hideous and horrible, with its hands at my throat. I could have sent it away, sent it back to its tomb, destroyed its record, burned the one witness against me. You prevented me. No one but you, and you know it. And now what is there before me but terrible shame, ruin, the mockery of the world, a lonely, dishonoured life. A lonely, dishonoured death it may be someday. Let women make no more ideals of men. Let them not place them on altars and bow before them, or they may ruin other lives, as completely as you whom I have loved so wildly, have ruined mine.